What happens when someone with money thinks they can take anything they want, even from a child? I'm just a single dad, but the day a billionaire's daughter took my son's ATV, I made a decision she never saw coming. Ethan Cole didn't measure his life in dollars, because if he did, he'd probably feel like he was always falling short. Instead, he measured it in moments, small, quiet victories that most people would overlook, like getting Liam to laugh after a long day, like fixing something broken instead of replacing it, like putting food on the table, even when it meant skipping a meal himself. Being a single father hadn't been part of his plan, but life had a way of rewriting things without asking permission. Ever since his wife passed, it had just been the two of them, figuring things out one day at a time on their modest piece of land just outside town. The house wasn't much, old wood, creaky floors, and a roof that needed patching more often than Ethan liked, but it was theirs, and more importantly, it was filled with love. Money was always tight. Ethan worked long hours doing whatever jobs he could find, mechanic work, fence repairs, hauling equipment, anything that paid enough to keep things going. Every dollar had a purpose before it even hit his pocket. Bills came first, then groceries, then whatever was left, which usually wasn't much. But Ethan had made a quiet promise to himself after his wife died. Liam would never feel like he had less, even if they did. That promise became the driving force behind everything he did. So when Liam started talking about an ATV, his eyes lighting up every time he saw one pass by on the dirt roads, Ethan didn't brush it off like a distant dream. He listened. And then he got to work. It took months, extra shifts, late nights, fixing engines under dim lights while the rest of the world slept. There were days his hands were so sore he could barely grip his tools, but he kept going. He skipped small comforts, no takeout, no new clothes, no unnecessary spending, just a steady focus on one goal. Liam didn't know any of this. To him, life was simple, even if it wasn't easy, and Ethan wanted to keep it that way for as long as he could. Finally, after what felt like forever, Ethan had saved enough. The ATV wasn't brand new, but it was solid, reliable, and safe. And when he brought it home, hiding it behind the shed until the right moment, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: pride. The day he gave it to Liam was one Ethan would never forget. It wasn't a birthday or a holiday, just an ordinary afternoon that turned into something unforgettable. Liam had come outside, confused at first, then completely frozen when he saw it. His eyes widened, his mouth slowly dropping open as if he couldn't quite believe it was real. Is that mine?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, trying to act casual, but the smile on his face gave him away. In the next second, Liam ran toward him, wrapping his arms around his dad so tightly it almost knocked the breath out of him. That hug made every late night, every sacrifice, every aching muscle worth it. From that day on, the ATV became more than just a machine. It became their escape. Every weekend, they'd ride together across the open fields, the sound of the engine blending with laughter that echoed through the air. For a little while, the weight of the world didn't exist. Liam wasn't the kid who had lost his mom, and Ethan wasn't the man struggling to keep everything together. They were just father and son chasing the horizon, creating memories that would last far longer than any hardship. Ethan watched Liam closely during those rides, the way his son smiled, the way his confidence grew, and he knew he had done something right. To anyone else, it was just an ATV, used, slightly worn, nothing special. But to Liam and Ethan, it was everything. It was proof that hard work meant something. Proof that even in a life full of challenges, you could still create moments of joy. It was a reminder that love didn't need to be expensive to be powerful. Ethan didn't know it yet, but that red ATV would soon become the center of a storm he never saw coming. And when that moment arrived, everything he believed about hard work, respect, and standing his ground would be tested in ways he never imagined. But for now, as the sun dipped below the horizon and Liam's laughter filled the air, Ethan allowed himself a rare moment of peace, holding on to the simple truth that sometimes the smallest things mean the most. Life had a rhythm to it in Ethan Cole's world, the kind built on routine, hard work, and the quiet understanding that nothing came easy, but nothing worth having ever did. After the ATV came into their lives, that rhythm felt lighter, almost hopeful. Liam had something to look forward to, and Ethan had something that reminded him his sacrifices were paying off. For a while, things felt steady. But peace, Ethan had learned, rarely lasted forever. It started with construction trucks rumbling past their dirt road, big, expensive machines that didn't belong in their quiet stretch of land. At first, Ethan didn't think much of it. Someone was building something up the hill, and in a growing town, that wasn't unusual. But as days turned into weeks, the scale of it became impossible to ignore. Steel beams, glass panels, luxury vehicles. It wasn't just a house, it was a statement. Eventually, the mansion stood complete, towering over everything else like it didn't belong to the same world. It had walls of glass that reflected the sun like a mirror, a long driveway lined with imported stone, and security gates that made it clear this place was meant to keep people out. Word spread quickly, as it always did in small towns. The property belonged to Vanessa Klein, the daughter of a billionaire CEO whose name people recognized even if they didn't fully understand what his company did. Vanessa herself became a topic of conversation. Her lifestyle, her parties, her presence online. People said she had more followers than the town had residents. To Ethan, none of it mattered. He kept his head down, focused on his work and his son. Whatever world existed up on that hill, it had nothing to do with them. Or at least, that's what he thought. The day everything changed started like any other. The sun was high, the air warm, and Ethan was repairing a broken section of fence near the edge of their property. Liam had taken the ATV out earlier, riding along the familiar trails they both knew by heart. Ethan could hear the distant hum of the engine now and then, a sound that had become oddly comforting. It meant Liam was happy, safe, and close. But after a while, that sound disappeared. At first, Ethan didn't notice. Silence wasn't unusual. Liam often stopped to explore or rest. But then the minutes stretched longer than they should have, and something in Ethan's chest tightened. That's when Liam came running. He wasn't just out of breath, he was panicked. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a fear Ethan hadn't seen in a long time. "Dad," he said, struggling to get the words out. "My ATV! It's gone!" For a second, Ethan didn't react. His mind tried to catch up to make sense of what he was hearing. Gone? That didn't make sense. The trails were empty, quiet, far from town. Who would even come out here? But when he looked at Liam, really looked, he knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. Something had happened. Ethan moved fast, grabbing his keys and heading toward the path Liam had taken. "Show me," he said, keeping his voice steady even though his thoughts were anything but. They followed the trail together, Ethan scanning the ground carefully. It didn't take long to find the tracks, fresh, clear, and unmistakably not Liam's usual riding pattern. These tracks were sharper, more aggressive, like someone unfamiliar with the terrain had taken control. And they didn't just wander aimlessly, they led in one direction, up the hill. Ethan felt a shift inside him then, something deeper than concern. It was instinct, the kind that told him this wasn't random, this wasn't some lost rider or a simple mistake. This was deliberate. He followed the tracks without hesitation, Liam close behind, until the dirt path turned into the paved road leading to the mansion. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Simple life below, luxury above. As they got closer, Ethan could see the gates, partially open, as if inviting something in, or letting something out. He didn't stop. Driving through those gates felt like crossing into another world. Everything was too clean, too polished, too perfect. And then he saw it. Parked near the pool, surrounded by lounge chairs and laughter, was the red ATV. Liam's ATV. For a brief moment, Ethan just stared at it, a mix of relief and disbelief washing over him. It was there, it wasn't gone. But then he saw who was on it. A girl, maybe in her early 20s, wearing expensive sunglasses and designer clothes, rode it in loose circles, clearly amused. Her friends sat nearby, watching and laughing as if it were all part of some casual entertainment. She didn't look like someone who had found something lost. She looked like someone who had taken something and never questioned whether she had the right to. Liam stepped closer to Ethan, his voice small but certain. "That's mine." Ethan nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the scene in front of him. The relief he had felt seconds ago hardened into something else entirely. This wasn't just about getting the ATV back anymore. This was about something far bigger. Respect, boundaries, and the kind of lesson his son was about to witness firsthand. As Ethan stepped forward, walking toward the pool with calm but unshakable purpose, one thing became clear. A line had been crossed, and he wasn't about to ignore it. Ethan walked forward with a steady pace, each step deliberate, his eyes locked on the red ATV as if it were the only thing that existed in that moment. Around him, the atmosphere of the mansion felt almost surreal. Music played softly from hidden speakers, laughter echoed near the pool, and everything looked polished, effortless, untouched by struggle. It was a world so different from his own that it almost felt unreal, like stepping into someone else's life. But the sight of Liam's ATV sitting there, being treated like a toy for entertainment, grounded him instantly. This was real, and it mattered. Liam stayed close behind him, quiet now, his small hand gripping the back of Ethan's shirt like he needed something solid to hold on to. Ethan could feel that grip, and it fueled him more than anything else. As he approached, the girl riding the ATV finally noticed him. She slowed to a stop, pushing her sunglasses up slightly as she looked him over, not with curiosity, but with a kind of casual judgment, like she was trying to figure out why he was even there. Her friends followed her gaze, their conversations fading into amused whispers. Ethan stopped a few feet away, his voice calm but firm when he spoke. "That ATV belongs to my son." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The weight of his words came from something deeper: certainty. The girl tilted her head slightly, glancing at the ATV and then back at Ethan as if she was processing something trivial. "Oh," she said lightly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I was just borrowing it." Her tone carried no apology, no hesitation, just assumption, like borrowing something without asking was the most natural thing in the world. Ethan felt a flicker of disbelief, not because of what she said, but because of how easily she said it. "You didn't ask," he replied, his voice still controlled. She shrugged, a small, dismissive movement that spoke volumes. "Do I need to?" The question hung in the air, heavier than it should have been. Behind Ethan, Liam shifted slightly, and Ethan could feel the impact of those words on his son without even turning around. It wasn't just what she was saying, it was what she believed, that rules didn't apply the same way to her, that other people's things didn't carry the same weight. Ethan took a breath, steadying himself. Anger would be easy, but anger wouldn't teach the right lesson, not to her, and more importantly, not to Liam. "I'm asking you now," Ethan said, meeting her gaze directly. "Give it back." For a moment, there was silence. Then one of her friends let out a quiet laugh, breaking the tension like it was nothing more than an awkward joke. The girl, Vanessa, Ethan realized, leaned back slightly on the ATV, crossing her arms. "You can relax," she said, her voice still light, almost amused. "It's not like I'm keeping it." But she made no move to get off, no move to return it. It was as if the idea of immediate action didn't even occur to her. That's when the security guards stepped in. They approached quickly but professionally, their presence shifting the energy of the scene. One of them addressed Ethan directly. "Sir, you're not authorized to be on this property. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." His tone was polite but firm enough to make it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Ethan glanced at him briefly, then back at Vanessa, who watched the exchange with quiet confidence, as if she already knew how it would end. Ethan understood what was happening. This wasn't just about an ATV anymore. This was about power, who had it and who didn't. He could argue, he could raise his voice, demand fairness, push back harder, but standing there, with Liam behind him, he realized something more important than winning an argument. This moment wasn't about proving something to them. It was about showing his son what it meant to stand your ground without losing yourself. Slowly, Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. At first, no one reacted. Vanessa watched with mild curiosity as Ethan held the phone up, the camera steady. He didn't say anything right away. He simply let it record. The ATV, her sitting on it, the guards beside him, the entire scene exactly as it was. Then, calmly, he spoke again. "This ATV belongs to my son." His voice was clear. "And you took it without asking." Vanessa's expression shifted slightly, not into guilt, but into something more cautious. "I told you I was borrowing it," she replied, though now there was a hint of defensiveness in her tone. Ethan nodded slightly, as if acknowledging her words, but he didn't lower the phone. "And now I'm asking for it back." The guard stepped closer. "Sir, you need to stop recording and leave the property."
Ethan didn't argue. He didn't resist. He simply lowered the phone slightly, his gaze steady. "We're leaving," he said, then looked at Vanessa one last time. "But this isn't over." He turned, placing a reassuring hand on Liam's shoulder as they walked back towards the truck. Liam didn't say anything, but Ethan could feel the questions, the confusion, the quiet hurt. As they drove away, the mansion shrinking behind them, Ethan knew one thing for certain. He might not have power or money, but he had something else, and he was about to use it.
The drive home was quiet, the kind of silence that felt heavier than any argument. Liam sat beside Ethan, staring out the window, his small hands clenched in his lap. He hadn't asked any questions, hadn't said a word since they left the mansion, but Ethan could feel everything his son was trying to process: confusion, disappointment, maybe even a little bit of doubt. And that's what stayed with Ethan the most. Not the disrespect from Vanessa, not the guards, not even the moment itself, but the idea that Liam might walk away from this thinking that some people could just take what they wanted and get away with it. Ethan couldn't let that be the lesson. When they pulled into their driveway, Ethan turned off the engine but didn't get out right away. He rested his hands on the steering wheel for a moment, thinking. He wasn't a man who chased attention. He didn't believe in drama or public scenes. But this wasn't about pride, it was about principle. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, replaying the video he had recorded. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't edited, it was just raw truth. Vanessa on the ATV, her words, the security stepping in. No exaggeration, no spin, just what happened. Ethan glanced at Liam, who finally looked back at him, eyes searching for answers. "Sometimes," Ethan said quietly, "when people don't listen the right way, you have to find another way to be heard." That evening, after Liam went inside, Ethan sat at the old wooden table in the kitchen, the glow of his phone lighting the room. His finger hovered over the screen for a moment. He knew once he did this, there was no taking it back. But then he thought about Liam's face at the mansion, about the way that moment could shape how his son saw the world, and that was enough. Without overthinking it any further, Ethan uploaded the video. At first, nothing happened. A few views, a couple of comments, the kind of slow start that made it seem like maybe this would just fade away like everything else. Ethan put his phone down and went about his night, not expecting much. But by morning, everything had changed. The video had spread. What started as a handful of views turned into thousands, then hundreds of thousands, then millions. People weren't just watching, it was resonating. Comments poured in from everywhere. Strangers saw what Ethan saw, a clear moment where power had been used carelessly, where something meaningful had been dismissed like it didn't matter. But more than that, they saw Liam, a kid standing quietly, watching the world treat him like he didn't count, and that struck something deeper. By midday, the story had taken on a life of its own. News pages picked it up, influencers shared it, discussions sparked across platforms, and with every share, the focus remained the same. Not wealth, not status, but respect. People began asking questions. Who was she? How did this happen? Why did she think it was okay? And suddenly, the name Vanessa Klein wasn't just associated with luxury, it was tied to something else entirely. Consequences came fast. Brands that had once proudly partnered with Vanessa began distancing themselves. Sponsorships quietly disappeared. Statements were released, careful and measured, but clear in their intent. Her image, carefully built over years, started to crack under the weight of public scrutiny. And beyond the online world, pressure reached somewhere even more powerful: her family. Her father's company issued a public apology, not just acknowledging the situation, but addressing the importance of accountability. It wasn't just about damage control anymore, it was about response. 2 days later, a black SUV pulled into Ethan's driveway. Ethan stepped outside, Liam close behind him, curiosity replacing the silence from before. A man in a suit stepped out, opening the back door carefully. And there it was, the red ATV, cleaned, polished, looking almost newer than before. It was returned, without fanfare, without excuses, just quietly placed back where it belonged. The man handed Ethan an envelope, not at once, and left without saying much else. Ethan didn't open it right away.
He watched as Liam walked slowly toward the ATV, his eyes lighting up again, that same spark returning like it had never left. He ran his hand along the handlebars, as if making sure it was real. Then he looked back at his dad, a small smile forming. And in that moment, Ethan knew this had never really been about getting it back. It was about something bigger. Later that evening, Ethan finally opened the envelope. Inside was a formal apology, carefully written, along with a check. He read it once, then folded it back without much reaction. Money wasn't the point, it never had been. He set it aside and walked outside where Liam was already sitting on the ATV, waiting. Ethan leaned against the fence, watching him for a moment before speaking. "You see what happened?" he asked. Liam nodded. "Yeah," he said softly. Ethan crossed his arms, his voice calm but certain. "People might have more than you. They might have power, money, influence, but that doesn't give them the right to treat you like you don't matter." Liam looked down for a second, then back up. "And if they do?" he asked. Ethan smiled slightly. "Then," he said, "you stand your ground, the right way." Because sometimes the loudest statement isn't made by shouting. Sometimes it's made when silence finally breaks.
If this story made you feel something, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more real and powerful stories on Drew Daily Stories. Because every story we share has a lesson worth remembering.